Hello and welcome to our Writing Workshop series. This is a collaboration between the North Bay Public Library and members of the North Bay Writers Group. My name is Bethany and I will be your host for this series. Each episode of this series will focus on different writing topics, including story creation, dialogue, research, and more. Each episode will also feature different hosts from the North Bay Writers Group. In this episode, Jared will talk about profundity, setting, and dialogue.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for another writing workshop brought to you by the North Bay Public Library. My name is Jared Hill, and today I would like to discuss three specific yet extremely important aspects of writing. To begin, I will delve into the concept of profundity, the ways you can distinguish yourself using dialogue and setting, and how those two aspects can go together and make you a stronger writer. Dreams are often the most profound when they seem the most crazy. Sigmund Freud. Concept 1. Let's look at what it means to write something profound. Well, in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, profound is defined as having intellectual depth or insight. But what does that mean to you as a writer? When I am writing, my initial thoughts on what I'm seeking to write begin with that very question. Though seemingly a selfish thought, what many of we artists don't realize is that our interests undoubtedly are at least mildly interesting to someone else. When finding inspiration, say from a current social event, the first thing I recommend you consider is how it affects you, and how you think it began, and where you think it will go. You need to look at yourself as an actor, or an oracle in a way. You as a writer are playing a part, the part of the character you are creating. You need to know where you stand, where you have stood, and where you will be going through the eyes of your character. You must think of where you will be going before you've even written what is happening to your character right now. In developing your character, you will know how they will react. In deciding what will happen, you will shape your character as events unfold to lead them to their eventual destination. For example, you have a generic character with an interest in punk rock, watching as someone like President Nixon is rising to power. You know that, by their character, they are extremely opposed to corrupt government. You know Nixon will be caught in the Watergate scandal, and you know he will step down to avoid impeachment. How would your character react to this knowledge of corruption? How does this situation affect the world around them? How will they react when the president steps down? So, in order to ensure you are creating a worthwhile work, first for yourself and then with the intention to entertain others, you must think like the characters you are creating. Why does that matter? Because your opinion is valuable, your perspective has the potential to create something amazing, and what you have to say and create, no matter the subject, is beautiful. Having said all this, I would like to add that what truly makes profound work is any writing that evokes emotion. Not unlike educators, we as writers and artists seek to change lives in a positive way. Through tales of tragedy, triumph, and tribulation, profundity is found in trials and overcoming obstacles that the reader does not see coming. By doing so and implementing all aspects mentioned previously, you will teach readers lessons through emotional connection. It is the hope of any writer to make their reader feel like one with the character and cause an impact that makes the individual better in some part of their life. Do not forget, however, that your writing affects you personally. That is also a goal. I said that having your work affect your reader in a positive way was essential, but it is also essential that fundamentally changing an aspect of yourself while writing it is an ultimate goal. You deserve happiness from your writing just as much as your reader does. To amplify the beauty in your writing, there are consistently two areas I feel a lot of writers need to focus on. And this will bring us to our next concept. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. Hamlet, William Shakespeare. Chapter 2. Dialogue. As I am sure you know, dialogue is the verbal communication within a story or script. Your character voices are fundamental in both their development and giving them distinguishing aspects. Giving the characters accents, a catchphrase, and individual diction all prevent your writing from seeming flat and uninteresting. Much like any person you meet, how an individual talks and carries themselves says a lot about their character. So please, bear this in mind whenever writing. Additionally, using adjectives to portray how a character says something is a tremendous asset. Keeping it bland like, "That's it then," Joe said, doesn't give the reader much to go on. However, wording it like, "That's it then," exclaims Joe with venom, makes the intentions of the character much more apparent. This can be overdone, so I advise that writers implement this tool to establish an emotion until that feeling has run its course. Like in any real-life conversation, it is rare an individual begins an interaction with anger. There's generally a build-up and or cool-down period within any back and forth between two or more people, and sometimes less time in between, granted circumstances. Even in first-person dialogue writing, it is crucial to consider the reactions and feelings of both or all parties as the dialogue continues. One person may begin calm during a conversation, then become increasingly agitated. Their counterpart may begin agitated and have their emotions develop into sadness while their interaction goes on. How this dialogue goes can truly define a character, so be extremely mindful when creating a diverse dialogue sequence. It is extremely important to give the reader creative liberty. However, giving them a little more boost is vital in making sure the reader knows what you are trying to say. I remember reading Scooby-Doo books in my youth, and every bit of dialogue ended in Daphne, Fred, Velma, etc. exclaimed. Almost every time. When I got older and read more advanced novels, I noticed a trend in the writer trying to really convey what they wanted you to see in their character. More importantly, great writers avoid being overly repetitive. Repetition under most circumstances is the absolute bane of a writer. It makes the reader feel stupid and the writer seem careless. Excluding situations like Stephen King's "all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy" from The Shining, a great writer will look for as many ways as possible to properly convey their point without the need of repetition. For this, a thesaurus is a writer's greatest friend. For example, thesaurus.com lists about 30 different words that can be used aside from convey. Not all will apply to every situation, of course, but knowing these words and being able to dictate when they should be implemented turns a boring, repetitive writer into an intellectual, verbally adept one. With that said, it is important to note that dialogue is clearly not the only way to tell a reader about your character. There are a multitude of facets one must consider in order to accomplish proper character creation. The plot is a very obvious one. However, nonverbal actions and even the environment around your character can say a lot about them, which will bring us to our next subject. Setting. Setting, put plainly, is the place in which you put your characters. However, the setting can be made into what makes the character grow. If we look at Frank Herbert's Dune, it isn't until Paul Atreides reaches the planet Arrakis that he is able to unlock prescient abilities. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about here, there is something in the air that basically gives this dude named Paul the ability to see the future. Very basically. Anyway, such things as the household the character lives in, the school they go or went to, the general look of their workplace all contribute a variety of factors and elements of a character. You could write about a character that, for example, had an obsession with organization. However, this is strictly at work. When they come home, they just let it all go. Their apartment is littered with old beer cans, last week's takeout, yesterday's takeout, and dirty laundry. Were you to go to their work, though, you would find everything color-coded and alphabetically filed. Their desk only has the barest of necessities: one pencil, one pen, a phone, their nameplate, and a small stapler. This could either tell you that the character wants the whole world to view them as prim and proper and professional, when actually they just suck at being organized, just like everyone else. Or they could be a serial killer. That's really up to you. One thing I highly recommend you avoid doing is describing something in too much detail. When depicting a scene, a hallway in a horror book, for example, I would like to try and keep something like that a bit more minimalistic. Janet stood at the end of the hallway, the doors lock echoing from behind her, and the dimly lit hall stared dauntingly back at the young lass. A light flickered, and the thought in the distance she could hear something sharp and metal being dragged across the floor, etching ever closer to her, moment by moment, is better than the vertically challenged individual who considered herself a young woman, complete with brown hair and blue eyes, stood in front of an old mahogany door at the end of an extremely long hallway, exactly 24 feet long. The clamoring sound of a 1984 lock turned within the mahogany door behind the 5-foot, 3-inch tall youth, reverberating lightly within her ear holes. This sent literal chills down her spine as a fluorescent light 2 rows down on the right of her began to flicker. Not only is that just too long and asinine to write, it is imperative, especially in horror actually, to let the reader use their imagination. As mentioned before, you do not want to make the reader feel stupid. Over-explaining something steals from the story, your message, and honestly is an insult to the reader. Describe what you must to set the scene, but don't overly paint it. With all that said, one can optimize their skills by mixing the dialogues with the setting of their scene. Having your character react to the environment is one way to do so. Have a character throw an object during a verbal fight, or a fist during a fist fight. Adjectives are your best friend, and setting an atmosphere with the surrounding is a great way to give the dialogue a whole new feel. Want a romantic scene where 2 lost lovers find each other? Have them holler over the rain in a thunderstorm. Want an intense battle in a modern-day setting? Have them meet their nemesis in an unnecessarily echoey garage in their secret dojo or whatever. Want something to spruce up your sci-fi? Add some obscure technology that fills a need humans haven't even thought of yet. All these background, seemingly unimportant things are actually vital and cause the reader to be more immersed in your tale. To further my point, I have taken an excerpt from my book Broken People and supplied you with 3 different examples. Tell me what you think about these. Example 1. We met in a cafe. We had coffee and tea. Jen sat in front of me as we did so. "Thanks for meeting up with me," she said. Second example. The city seemed to shimmer in the autumn cold. Leaves danced about outside the cafe window in the breeze, carelessly being carried about. My attention was on Jen, however. She had called me there to this honestly hipster cafe, seemingly in a worry. "Thanks for meeting up with me," Jen said sincerely, a worried look on her face as she peered down into her tea. Example 3. The day was the 15th of October.
I remember it being a particularly cool day in autumn, only 5 degrees and breezy. Foliage littered the streets as the consistent annual decay took over, betraying the trees. I had been asked by a recent acquaintance whose given name was Jen to meet at a cafe in town. Admittedly, I had a predisposition for the venue. Many a times I had passed by to notice that many of the individuals who frequented it would be dubbed as hipsters. This had much more to do with the general customer's fashion sense and propensity to write books or presentations for hours on end whilst milking the purchase of a single coffee as an excuse to remain there, and less to do with the cafe itself. Regardless of my opinion on the cafe's patrons, I gladly rushed over to see what seemed to be the matter. Jen had called me seemingly in a sense of urgency relatively early that day. Though at this point I did not know this person well, I did seem to have feelings of affection toward them, and wished that one day they may be reciprocated. Hence there I sat in the generic cafe drinking generic coffee, listening to a person I had tremendous interest in pour her heart out to me. And it's still going. Thanks for meeting me here in exactly 15 minutes from when I called, despite any potential factors being of a different priority level for you. Jen explains briefly. Her auburn hair glistened in... You know what? I think you get the picture. The first one, too minimal. The second one, kind of just right. May need a few tweaks. This one is enough to drive a person insane. If you have learned anything from my mad ravings today, I hope it is the following. Remember to have a reason and inspiration for what you are writing. People can tell when you have been forced to write something. It lacks soul, depth, and more often than not, the usual style you have. Keep your passion for your art. Use dialogue to give each character a unique quality and show their progression as a character. Allow the settings to have your character in to serve a greater purpose for the reader. Don't let it remain as something unsaid or be viewed as something unimportant. Every letter on your page should serve some way to propel your story forward. And possibly, most importantly, remember my examples, because I will read them again. And that took way too long for both of us. I actually hope it was a fun experience for all of you here today listening, and that you learned something both about yourself and how you can write differently. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time.
NBPL Podcasts is a production of the North Bay Public Library. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Also, if you know someone who might be interested in this series, please share this with them. Thanks to the North Bay Writers Group for sharing their time and talents in this series. If you'd like to learn more about this group, there is a link to their Facebook group in the show notes. Follow the North Bay Public Library on Facebook and connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at North_Bay PL.